What's up, everybody? Earlier and earlier, Jupiter and Saturn rise. Tonight I'm getting Jupiter pretty low altitude, so it's great. I can't even see Saturn yet. So we'll have the most time tonight, I think, maybe a couple hours. 11:15 on the East Coast, the edge of space. It's your captain speaking. I got some waffles on the stove and some coffee brewing and some tunes for y'all. Got Jupiter up close right now. We'll see if the Great Red Storm graces us tonight. And then, of course, there's a wide shot with all the Galilean moons. We also have Saturn coming up in tow, maybe in like 30 minutes or so. So just settle in, get your favorite drink, remember to hit 4K, and yeah. Hope you all have had a great day. It's going to be a nice night. And what's up, Kimmy? Welcome, you're first. The brighter I can see, it's all of us that need to keep our hands above water. That's the knowledge you can read, it's all the little curse and secret. Such a critical need, technology by himself, real to me, make it real. Far as I can see, it's all of us catching a dream of a creature of the sea. Some magic, space and time, space and time, space and time. So far as I can see, beginning we caught at first, and told you what I mean beyond the real. As far as I can see, it's all of us catching a dream of a creature of the sea. Losing magic of space into space into space into space. up, everybody? Hopping back in here. Let's see who we got in the chat. What's happening? Cat Dan, Lost Brooklyn, Genghis Khan, Jedi Princess, Arum Vorax, Debbie Carson. What's happening, everybody? Just finishing up my waffles. Getting some coffee. All right, I got some Jupiter with a wide shot. Like I just showed, got the Galilean moons, Callisto hanging off the top right, but got Ganymede, Europa, Jupiter, and then Io. We'll see if Io is going to end up kind of near Jupiter. I'm trying to see if that works, but regardless, Jupiter at 17 degrees altitude for reference, 11:24 p.m. It's looking really nice tonight, still rising. I don't even see Saturn yet, so that's good. And I want to talk a little bit about Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic field in terms of memory. So it's pretty much the same stuff I've been talking about every night, but if you haven't checked out Rupert Sheldrake, you really should. And really just all his recent videos, and especially the ones from a few years back where he created a documentary about doing some very simple experiments. Things like doing studies on whether you can feel if somebody's looking at you or looking at your back. Are you going to turn around? Is basically line of sight directional, and is there a real connection? Another thing would be dogs knowing when their owners are coming home. So he's did a whole study, he's done it for many years, about how dogs can tell when you're thinking about coming home, not just when you're near the house, and how these fields interact. And so he's been really one of the leading proponents of this concept for a lot of years. He used to go on speaking tours with Terrence McKenna, and I want to say Ralph something, which I'm spacing on right now. But the three of them used to go and do speaking tours and talk about this, not only psychedelics, psilocybin, DMT, but Rupert Sheldrake has been talking about this kind of exogenesis of plants and morphic field resonance, and how resonance actually is sort of what imprints, not sort of, but actually what imprints signatures of experience, of personality, of memory, of genetic code, what, you know, we live in this world right now where genetic code and genes, the selfish gene, the Dawkins kind of cult really will not let us go beyond it. But what he's been talking about is the fact that genes are only one aspect of this, but really the resonance and the echoes of the plasma layers through time are what makes cultures happen. So in the simplest way, family units have like a plasma sheath around them that passes on the information through resonance in these plasma layers. If you can imagine cymatics or Chladni plate, these type of sacred geometries that are created using these vibrational plates in sand or salt. I'm sure you've seen them before. But these are essentially what, if you can imagine physically or visually what signatures look like. So a memory will form, collapse into the wave function around your body. It will be stored in some sort of resonant structure, the same way we see on those plates. And then as we move forward in time, we resonate with those moments, thus reminding ourselves who we are and forming new combined additive effects by experiencing the layer prior to us and making the new one as we're experiencing the last one, which is that kind of center of the hyperboloid and the donut geometry, the torus. So the center of this field, this plasmoid, at the center of every tiny particle and every large system, and recursively throughout all groups of systems, is pure electric consciousness. To put it very simply, it is highly complicated, but at the core, the structure is very simple. We see it everywhere. We're seeing it right now with Jupiter and its moons, and we'll see it close up with Jupiter and its counter-rotating currents. And if I could zoom in further, the red spot, you'd actually see angles to it. It would be hexagonal due to the packing nature and the boundary layer creation between two plasma shells. So that's a little bit about what the title is tonight, and also definitely check out Rupert Sheldrake if you haven't. I'll get back to some tunes here, say what's up to everybody in the chat. What's up, Tim Phillips? Sounds great, awesome. Thanks for the feedback. Aram Borak says, what up, what up? Anyone here that trees have been recorded making a tune vibration? So somebody was challenging Rupert Sheldrake to, plants are really not conscious. And he was saying, no, actually, if you speed up these time lapses of plants, vines, for example, searching for something to grab onto, they're very much conscious. And he phrases it in a really great way, which is consciousness, instead of being defined via the self and the ego, maybe consciousness is defined as making a decision when many possibilities exist. If something makes that decision, then it's conscious. And you imagine a lot of things fall under that umbrella: plants, animals, insects, bacteria, and ultimately, why not planets? And why not solar systems and galaxies? They might have a super consciousness that we could only imagine because we're so small, and dimensionally we have our version. But ultimately it's the same stuff: the aperture, the human aperture, or the insect aperture, the small tube that we are reinterpreting, choking on waffles, little tubules, at every scale, sucking in the universe, reinterpreting it, and then creating a new layer of the universe, while also leaving an echo of it behind us, or in whatever direction behind it is. So I think that's what I've been vibing on over the last for a while, but today, really Rupert Sheldrake, check it out, and tunes.
I was shaken by the pain of love. Mom never said that I had to get older, 'cause I was thinking of calling you up to bring me back towards emotion. Let's meet down by the house of cards and watch the sun go supernova. 10,000 days on earth I've waited all alone to trip. 10,000 days on earth I've played along while the record skips. And all I got to say, we all rock the same. Oh, all I got to say, we all rock the same. Come on, high, high, high.
just whip up cool chicks. Yeah, my second television flips. Something out there, real wild. Separation, well, sin wild. Sliding down, right, get the wall. It's a big television. Get the wall, it's a photon. Get it, good, get it. Separation, get it, good, get it, good, get it. Terra eyes, the night is on. Find its way until the hot dogs done. It's fine, favorite wine. Until the time, until the twilight are gone. Well, so they you're well, so fight for it. It's just red love, cool chicks. And I'm on it, look at the ones they both is. I'm being real wild, till well, said why really why still well. It's like it's get it good, 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 get it. Syncopated television, suffering artifacts, separation information, slithering down the tracks. Syncopated television, coherent integration. Syncopated television, suffering artifacts, separation information, slithering down the tracks. Syncopated television, coherent integration. All right. What's up, Michael Clark, and anybody else just join in? Play a few more jams here and then talk some more, but really just dropped you the link to Rupert Sheldrake's channel, and I'll drop you one more link, which is one of the earlier videos. It's a bit lower production, or just older production, but kind of gives you a good intro and shows you how long this guy's been doing it. That's a video for you. So really this idea of, Rupert Sheldrake doesn't really talk about Birkeland filaments or, the coaxial circuit like Ken Wheeler does. But I think it's really just a matter of putting it all together, right? So if you take Ken Wheeler and you try and listen to him talk about light and magnetism, Theoria Apophysis channel, you kind of mix that with Eileen McCusick's human biofield in terms of memory, in terms of trauma, in terms of resonance and tuning. And then you mix that a little bit with, what was I going to say? Rupert Sheldrake, yeah. Rupert Sheldrake's idea of the morphic field and morphic resonance. And I think what he means by that is really just these plasma shells getting imprinted with a certain type of frequency. And this remaining, the past and the present being the compounded effect of all those imprints layered and then re-experienced. So to put it all together, you get this kind of floating plasma shell around every object and every human, at least. And the way we connect with planets is the same. The way we connect with each other is the same. And likely there's kind of this superorganism which has its own bubble that stretches. Like, for example, wolf packs that separate remain kind of bound by this plasma sheath. And I would imagine that Earth is probably bound to some degree to its original host or family system. So there's this whole idea of celestial linking, family linking, and I imagine it's in literally physical manifest plasma, imprinted as frequency resonance. Trying to be very articulate about it, trying to learn how to say it a bit better each time and more concisely. So let me know if you have any thoughts, or maybe I've just drilled it in so much and it's starting to sound like mush, but it's worth talking about. And you know, channels like Rupert Sheldrake having 30,000 followers and Dr. Pierre-Marie Robitaille, Sky Scholar, having 20,000 followers compared to all this other junk on YouTube, so much junk that have millions and millions of clicks and 700,000 followers, this guy and that guy talking utter gibberish. And Dr. Robitaille, Ken Wheeler. Well, Ken Wheeler finally really has like 200 and some odd thousand. He really built it, so it's great that at least he's kind of getting that information out there. Anyway, check all those cats out. I got links in the description, and if you need anything, I can add it to the chat as well. I've been trying to get a little more organized around playlists as well, so if you are hankering from some TakeBackSpace when I'm not on, go check out some of the older playlists. They should be organized, and it's a lot of fun to go back a few years and see. I've been on this electric tip for a while. All right, tunes.
Bring me back, just bring me back out of the cold. Ooh, bring me back, just bring me back. I need you more. This cosmic revelation, we all have our bases to play. We the creatures guiding against the grain. Built your world with nothing to fear but yourself. Apparitions that we bleed through. Every fear you're open wide, soul modulation. You just come feel this ride so high, your love I'm craving. But I can't see it till you, just bring me back. Oh, bring me back out of the cold. Just bring me back. Feel your open wide soul modulation. You just can feel this ride so high, your love I'm craving. You just can't see it till you, yeah, bring me back. Just bring me back out of the cold. You know, bring me back.
All right. Let's jump into some chat here and some sketching, some telestration. Just to talk a little bit about how, in context, even if you don't understand how it works around the human body, it makes sense to see things in space as connected. And I just want to get this paint program pulled up. Genghis Khan says, interesting to think Jupiter has rings as well. However, they are so thin and made mostly of dust compared to Saturn's icy ring. So hard for us to make it out with scopes. Yep, I can agree with that, but I think it just might be the amount of particulate that is condensed around Jupiter, possibly because it's just older, or possibly because the moons kind of Jupiter have just demolished the rings. I heard some stories about that, that Earth once had a ring. Basically everybody has a ring at some point, and then it gets destroyed. And the reason that would happen is because these shells would organize particulate according to heavy elements and gases and metals and set them in shells around us, and those shells would be represented by rings. Makes a lot more sense geometrically. So let's see if this is going to work here. Sweet. Scribbles away. See if that's working okay. Okay, yeah. Sometimes it doesn't show up. So when it comes to planets, and I mentioned this the other night, but Walt Thornhill talking about the planets being hollow. So what it would be is like, if you can imagine a slice taken out, that it would be, so it'd be hollow there, but there would be this shell. So this is way harder than I thought. Hold on. I think I can draw better. So something like that, where these are counter-rotating currents. A lot like we have on Earth. Whoops, that's not correct. Does that make sense? All right. So that's something akin to how, so Jupiter would have like a very thick layer of liquid metallic hydrogen, nitrogen layers, all compressed and compacted really close to it, because that would be the moment of Jupiter's current state, current now moment. So there'd be that. The reason they'd be twisting and turning and doing these counter-rotating, having aurorae on the north and south pole, is because there'd be a spiraling Birkeland filament going through it. Coaxial circuit, as Ken calls it. There'd be the inertial plane, the plane of inertia. At the very center, there'd be this plasmoid. There'd be space between the plasmoid and Jupiter's shell, right? You know, if anybody out there wants to correct me, please feel free to. But this is me putting together all these different ideas and how I would imagine it working for, you know, if you can imagine that Jupiter is not only a planet, but a representation of a person, also representing a tiny particle, let's say. You can imagine that everything really has this shape, fractally, recursively, at different places in the timeline vector. And the timeline vector, I imagine, is something like this. So there's the spiral, conical, this is what creates the hyperboloid. But I imagine this to be a Fibonacci spiral if you look at it top down. These are the chimneys. And Donald Scott talks about this being a cylinder, right? But it's pinched. And this is what scientists kind of, I imagine, this is what gravitational lensing is some sort of byproduct of this, which is that matter is kind of compressed towards the plasmoid. But let's say it's a cylinder or a tube, right? Like we are a mouth, a mouth with a set of teeth, right? So energy in, process out, and then also in, out, going through this filament, this Birkeland filament. Imagine that since each node has this energy vortex that emanates from it, that this particle or this plasmoid is also kind of exists at some point along a much larger, it's moving along this. If you've ever seen that three-dimensional solar system video rendering that, you know, they show the sun and all the planets in a spirograph, but then they flip the camera and you see it kind of trailing through on a long path. So this is really the kind of skeleton X-ray of what you would imagine. It's not just random, just spiraling. So that's a little bit about Jupiter. I see the chat room is frozen, but there are people in there, so hope you all are enjoying this. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm trying to explain it as best I can, and of course this is, I don't want to take credit for any of these base ideas, but just putting together all these ideas is actually what makes it something I can throw my whole weight behind, because this really makes sense to me. Let me sketch just a little bit more on the shells. So Jupiter is existing in the moment of now, has these shells, its surface essentially, or it's the shell of the planet. Just like we have our skin, our epidermis, and I wonder, you know, I don't think it's empty between the plasmoid and Jupiter's surface or shell. It's probably some sort of plasma, maybe very light materials, less dense because being pushed out. And then Jupiter's shells exist in equilibrium with the outer pressure mediation from the surrounding electrical plasma ether. Let's see. And then, yeah, so what's happening is that as this plasmoid oscillates or pulses, like our heart, for example, it's releasing, it's absorbing its surrounding ether. So it's absorbing all of it. Donald Scott shows this model where it's like, it's a little bit more like this, like an electric star, but it's really a circuit. And so it's taking in its prior memory, like as I'm talking, I'm creating shells, talking to y'all, and y'all are getting this kind of collapsed plasma wave frequency, which is encoded as what we think of as sacred geometry or cymatics. And it's also taking in these memories as it's creating them, therefore creating a feedback loop, which I think is what we call consciousness. This bicameral mind, or the reason we have an ego and can view ourselves. But it makes sense that not only would that be the case, but planets should also be able to view themselves or experience themselves, because how would Jupiter look a certain way from day to day? It would have to retain its banding. It would have to retain the red storm. The concept of the red storm and its banding is imprinted in these plasma layers, is how I view this. And so as it exists as a plasmoid, pulsating, moving along this Birkeland filament, moving in a Fibonacci spiral, so to speak, it's also creating ripples in the plasma field and experiencing them simultaneously. And we are doing the same thing. So an apple is doing the same thing, a mosquito is doing the same thing, and we're just a very highly complex mutation of these plasma fields, of these nature's geometry, you know, with 7 chakras doing this exact same thing. So the heart chakra experiencing its energy field, its torus, so the donut right here, the infinity sign, the yin yang. Yeah. So there's a lot going on here. I know I've just basically scribbled the heck out of it, but you can see the same structure throughout. Many people have put it together. In fact, from the electric view, Buddy Dougherty has really done some amazing drawings on how this looks in terms of the torus, the hyperboloid, the unification of the two, and then how it kind of expands into much more complicated shapes. But they all come from the same sort of thing. Right here you can see this boundary layer that's formed. This is where, like, you can see Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility right here. You can also see a butterfly. Let's see how much I can remove of this. There we go. I'll head over to Saturn and show this, but of course Jupiter's moons are along this plane of inertia where matter is compressing them into tiny spherules. Matter is compressing them, that's not true. They're reaching an equilibrium state by internal pressure moving outwards from their center and then finding pressure from the surrounding ether, creating moons. And they're spiraling along these Fibonacci spirals that are not only from Jupiter, but, you know, imagine everything has these things. So it's subsets of subsets, groups. So the grouping of Jupiter and its moons has the same sort of nature as this structure as well. So it itself forms a nucleus, a plasmoid. I would imagine it's not necessarily a plasmoid. It's, you know, when Ken Wheeler talks about magnetism being not 2 objects being attracted to one another, but actually 2 objects attracted to a null point, what is essentially a black hole, you would imagine that in space there are tons of different objects creating multiples and multiples of these null zones where attraction occurs. And this is what might be regarded as, you know, those, we have billions and trillions of black holes in our solar system. Could be due to this, you know, the misinterpretation or the reinterpretation of this. All right, let's play some music. I'll take a little talking break. What's up, Astrolabium? Good to see you. And everybody hanging out. Annette, what's happening? Have I read The Universal One by Walter Russell? Can't say that I have, but I've watched a lot of stuff about Walter Russell. And the math is really the whole system of 9s and 6s and 3s. That whole geometry that you can superimpose right on this. He was showing it in terms of numerology, and I think it's really fascinating. Really fascinating. Let me hide this for a second. So again, it says, so our aura is a byproduct of an individual's current. Yeah, I think we pulse, the heart oscillates, and the body in turn oscillates in a certain way, and we vibrate the surrounding plasma or the air. We think of it as the air, but it's likely a different, there are probably all these layers, these so-called hidden dimensions in quantum mechanics. I feel like all popular science has this just spooky language, like George Carlin used to say, in order to kind of keep everybody dumbed down. But they're talking about concepts that can be explained with plasma and with, basically air around us that we think of as air, as empty, as just like wind, is actually storing information like a cloud, like a magnetic tape. Why wouldn't it do that? It's just a new idea that no one's really allowed to indulge in thinking like that. If you go into scientific circles, people laugh at you if you say things like that. But like Rupert Sheldrake, I mean, just watch the links that I posted earlier and you'll see how they vilify and they literally they recommend burning his book because he suggested that consciousness exists outside the body. That's just crazy. It's so easy to get lost in the numbers. It's true. Well, I think holistically what happens is if you can imagine this geometry, this that I've drawn, and I'll draw again, but the donut, the hyperboloid, and the fact that from that center point these magnetic field lines emerge, or what we think of as magnetic field lines, but it's really the field lines that emerge due to the I want to say incommensurability of the two, of counter space and space, the two dimensions we really have. So things are pushing outwards and then they're being resisted. And then in that interaction, they're being created. And so you have filaments and you have plasmoids. And this interaction, if you see, I posted the video yesterday of the sprites, but you'll see in the sprite videos that it's not just that it looks just like a tree and it looks like very intense lightning, but along the lightning bolt, you'll see these little nodules. Those nodules are easily could be planets on a galactic scale, and we easily could be those little nodules on a filament like Earth. If you took Earth out of context, out of what we imagine it as this giant planet that we're on, but imagine it being very, very tiny compared to the local supercluster. Earth is a little string. That's this idea, like we're little strings on Earth, or not even. So Earth is not necessarily a point, it's a line. And a line is made up of all the series of points. And the series of points, as I'm showing, as I'm pointing out, are imprinted as it moves through this kind of plasma. What I don't know is if the plasma moves as well, or the plasma is what everything is within, almost like a fishbowl, fish tank, and then resonance within this plasma fish tank is what creates all these filamentary structures. So like what's outside the simulation, or so-called simulation, who knows? But the idea that from the very smallest to the very largest that we, humankind, can perceive, there is a very strict and awesome and very balanced geometry to it. Something everybody can grasp, everybody can remember. Everybody remembers a donut, and everybody remembers an hourglass, and then and almost everybody's seen a magnetic field drawing or a sacred geometry drawing. So from that you can reinterpret almost everything in the universe, from rivers and lakes, to animals' interactions, to language and numbers, to computer circuit boards, to music. Almost absolutely everything, at least for me, is interpretable through these glasses. And that's why I keep showing it here, because this is the one thing that I found that I think is actually fundamentally different, and it makes way more sense than any of the, it's actually so much more exciting than conspiracies, because in fact it answers almost every question, from religion to parapsychology to consciousness, all in one fell swoop. and also allows you to debunk contemporary science rhetoric and jargon in a way that allows you to feel empowered. So you don't need to know all the, the Hawking equation. You don't need to know the third law of thermodynamics in order to understand planets and interaction between human beings and memory. These larger, big questions are very much answerable by everybody. If you just think about it a little bit. Let's see. Circle and triangle represent heaven and earth. Way too vague on that last comment. Awesome. All right, little break, like I said, and then I'm going to switch over to Saturn. But Jupiter's looking really nice. No intense storms on the upper band, and no great red storm on the lower band. Yo, what's up, SJ Sharks fan? It's been a while. Aru and Triple P. Trip P. It's called Salt Man.
Slowly till me come up from the sand, and you're carving the trees. to the stony high. All scream when the trains go by. All cramped on the city street. Lost fight on the rebel beach. All the awesome that can be. One enough for you, one enough for me. Silence of the night, this new vibration seems so clear. Synchronize the sauce and let's heal. We're on the way. Visions of the night feels the same along the brain. If you can recall the sense of fear, won't take my brain. Listen to the night with combinations on my mind. I'm still so awake, I always wanted to get up. Diamonds in the night, the sense of spaceship in my dome. I'm content to lie here in the darkness of my home. I get lost in my questions outside of the matter we see. Colossally test us. You know how I feel. Ending up inside of these faces, broken darkness of my father. Had to kill. Blood left me spare. I was just scared of being. Most of the time, it's such a fear. Can I be real? Most of the time, it's just what you feel. This new vibration seems so clear. Synchronize the sauce and let's heal. We're on the way. Visions of the night feels the same along the brain. If you can recall the sense of fear, won't take our brain. Listen to the night with combinations of my own. I'm still so awake, I always wanted to get home. Diamonds in the night, the sense of spaceship in my dome. I'm content to lie here in the darkness of my home.
All right. That was Set This Feeling. Before the synth one, Set This Feeling and The Silence of the Night. Both from totally different eras, but I just spotted this one. I hadn't played it in a while, so shift of energy. For some reason, the drift is pretty harsh. I had to realign the scope real quick. It's a little bit better, but look at that shot of Saturn. That is super nice. I tried to get the 3x Barlow working, but for some reason, I think Saturn's just really dim right now in magnitude. It's much tougher to get those magnifying shots without first setting it up with Jupiter. Either way, coming into an hour 15 here. I like these hour and a half, 2-hour shows. It's just enough for me to not get like totally exhausted from. So much fun. Talk about all these layers, and let me do a little bit more sketching before I get back to the tunes, just because I like this telestration. You can see, how Saturn's rings are not only counter-rotating, but also make sense in the larger scheme of things, and how they themselves probably have their own layers of memory and consciousness of what happened to them where they're from. Okay, so let's see, can I put something on in the background? Yeah. Yo, what's happening, Copper Trops? If it fits, ice it. What's up, Silent Murmur? How's it going? And Good to see everybody hanging out another night, grabbing some real space footage. It's so weird how we live in these times with such high-level technology, and yet also such primitive pop culture technology in a way. So we're still using old rockets like missiles, putting men on the top of missiles, and not electrostatic, electrogravitic. We're still using oil and burning coal to power electric vehicles that have been bastardized. There's so many strange things, but I don't want to make this a complaint show. Tonight was all about memory and personality, and this idea that not only do we as humans, but particles and everything in the universe has its memory shells and what it experiences as its echo. But the echo doesn't dissipate the same way we would imagine. And in fact, I would imagine that echoes don't dissipate ultimately, because they trail off. But you talk about these ages of music that have echoed down from the generations, and really what it is that it really is true. Like once something gets played, this music right now, or my voice, we're collapsing these wave functions, so to speak, creating imprints in plasma, and y'all are resonating sympathetically with it. So as a collective, we're creating this very large plasma layer in and on Earth. That's amazing. So somehow we're all tied to this thing, and when we all come together, we create more and more layers of that as I speak, and you react, and then we watch, and we're creating it including Saturn as well. So this giant plasma layer is actually forming between us, computers, Saturn, probably everything in between, because it's picking up, it's getting tainted and contaminated with other thoughts, just like your dreams would be. That's why I feel like this field of dreams, when you're sleeping, you're absorbing all these different energetic signals that were baked into the plasma by you, and then by things around you, and possibly by the house that you're in. Think about it, because why wouldn't the house retain an energy signature, tongue twister? And it's like, it would make a lot of sense. That's why you have haunted houses, for example, or this idea that human energy remains, because throughout history, all this superstition and mythology is not from nowhere, but you really can't explain it with contemporary science. And so there's this kind of weird middle ground of Hollywood joking about it, kind of implying that the government can sort of do it, or that maybe it's magic, or maybe it's supernatural, when in fact, plasma just being so abundant, and everything, including us, being very special, when you elevate human existence to so-called supernaturality, then you realize that we're just as important as Saturn. And everything has this kind of vibrational signature to which it flows. But, I wonder, if this is the only thing, but this is all we know now. Maybe the Earth and the universe becomes a tridimensional, maybe it breaks off, it splits, like we see with cells, and then everything starts to have multiple eyes. Or who knows? That's the rest of the coffee. So let me sketch just a little bit here. Okay. So we got a hexagon at the top of Saturn. Why do we have a hexagon? Whoops. This is going to be tricky. So why is there a hexagon? Because it was originally a almost perfect circle, or an oblate spheroid, because everything is oblate ultimately, or elliptical to some degree, so not perfectly circular is the point. And then as it emanated outwards, it reached resistance points, and the kind of equilibrium that it has reached is that these boundary layers were formed around the storm, I would imagine. And so it is packed in place, but it was originally pulsating from a point. Now, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but that is at least one way of looking at it, as opposed to it's some alien signal or some black cube or some weird kind of stuff that is really, that implies that somehow we don't understand Saturn. But it's very simple to understand Saturn because we're just like Saturn. So we got a hexagon, that's why there's a hexagon. We got counter-rotating currents. Lower this just a little bit. It's so weird, iTunes doesn't have a middle point. It's either off or too loud. I'm just gonna lower it. Turn it off, I mean. All right, counter-rotating currents. And then counter-rotating rings probably as well. And anybody out there think I'm completely wrong about this, please stop me or tell me what I'm doing wrong here. But I hope this makes sense. And the reason there's counter-rotating currents or rings or surface features that are like this is because of this Birkeland filament. You know, and it's not in isolation, it's connected back to the sun. And it's probably not just singular, it's probably twisting, coaxial. It's like lightning, bundled lightning, if you can imagine. And then this is where this kind of apple shape or the toroidal shape comes into play. And then the rings are along the plane of inertia where matter condenses, and it condenses in this spiral, right? And then at the center of Saturn, if we're talking about, let's say, potentially planets with shells and nuclei, so essentially hollow planets. So hollow Saturn would have a very thick shell. It would be arranged by elements based on frequency and vibration. So the plasma shells would arrange themselves, just like you see in Sapphire Project, where certain types of elements are, well, they're arranged in shells. So I'm kind of blanking on which is which, but I think heavy metals move to the surface and also move to the equator, and then move to the outer rim, and then to the inner rim are the lighter elements. But could be wrong there. So there's this, counter-rotating rings, Birkeland filament. Saturn is also creating layers or signatures, cymatic signatures, resonances, as it's pulsating and existing and spinning, and because of radiation, because this plasmoid at the center, I imagine is not only trying to absorb all the information or the ether around it, but it's also spitting out as much as it can. So this is trying to reach equilibrium. Is really kind of, the universe is very efficient, and I feel like this idea of Mother Nature or Gaia or the universe, even the fact that we as humans relate to it in that way. This is what keeps us alive, this equilibrium that is reached in this system between space and counter space. So Saturn is creating memories of itself and experiencing these memories simultaneously within the flux of this field. It's also emanating layers, and these layers are the birth of Saturn. and then closest to Saturn is the moment of now of Saturn. So to address one thing that we have in pop cosmology right now is this idea of like looking into the past, and to some degree it is true, and in other ways we really can only experience the moment of this plasmoid nucleus. That's the now moment. But I can imagine, we look into the past and we place attractors in the future that pull us towards something, which is whatever we decide the attractor is. And so the sun has its own consciousness, its own kind of toroidal hyperboloid field, and then it's connected to its parent, and so on and so forth. All right, let me know if you have any thoughts on that. The clouds have moved in, so it's a good time to start wrapping it up here. An hour and a half, nice, concise, articulate show. Let me know if you have any other thoughts about this whole system, but tomorrow or the day after, I'll be on again. We'll talk about it some more. Check out Rupert Sheldrake. Check out Sky Scholar, Dr. Pierre-Marie Robitaille. If you do anything in terms of research, just give each of them a video thumbs up, or see if you like it first, sorry. But at least watch one of their videos. It's so important to understand how to explain why the science that we live in today is really kind of messed up, and how we can take it to the future is by phrasing it correctly and understanding like what we're trying to achieve. Oh wait, Mars, let's see. Is Mars coming up right now? No, Mars is not close, Les. Mars is coming up at like 3 in the morning. But it just got really cloudy. I think I'm gonna get some rest, keep it an early night. All right, perfect. Cool. Well, thanks again to everybody. I'll catch you on the next stream. Make sure that you share this video with somebody who would appreciate it, and have a great day tomorrow. Keep looking up. Hope you all have clear skies. Peace, y'all. Peace. Good night.